This presentation discusses rubrics and how to develop them. As you may be aware, rubrics are tools used to evaluate student performance. Rubrics can be particularly helpful when you are evaluating performances, a written task, behavior, or projects. Existing classroom instructional activities often can be transformed into a performance assessment if you develop appropriate scoring criteria. A rubric is a scoring guide that helps you evaluate a student's performance using a full range of criteria rather than a single score. Simply put, it presents clear criteria, rules, or guidelines to help you judge a behavior or skill. A scoring rubric consists of a fixed scale from highest points to lowest points and a performance description for each of the points on the scale. Rubrics can be created and handed out to students to help students understand the criteria to be used for grading. At times, you may even have the students have input on creating the rubric. Assessing performance can be challenging. To score a performance assessment, one has to make some subjective judgments about the quality of a student's work. Many people feel uncomfortable with making and using subjective judgments and find that a good set of scoring guidelines or a rubric provides a way to make those judgments fair and sound. It does so by setting forth a uniform set of precisely defined criteria or guidelines that will be used to judge student work. Rubrics help students and teachers define quality. When students use rubrics regularly to self-assess and judge their own work, they begin to accept more responsibility for the end product. Rubrics also reduce the time teachers spend grading student work and makes it easier for teachers to explain to students or parents why they received that grade and what they can do to improve. Parents usually like rubrics once they understand how to use them, and they find rubrics useful when helping with homework. Rubrics should be organized and clarify the scoring criteria well enough so that two teachers who apply the rubric to a student's work will generally arrive at the same score. The degree of agreement between the scores assigned by two independent scorers is a measure of the reliability of an assessment. This type of consistency is necessary for a performance assessment to yield good data that can be used to improve student performance across classrooms as well as to develop school improvement plans. A good scoring rubric will help teachers define excellence and plan how to help students achieve it. It will communicate to students what constitutes excellence and how to evaluate their own work. A good scoring rubric will help teachers or other raters be accurate, less biased, and consistent in scoring. Rubrics have multiple advantages. They help increase quality of instruction by drawing attention to the elements that are considered important. Rubrics also provide explicit guidelines to students regarding teachers' expectations. When used appropriately, rubrics can be used as a tool to develop student abilities, and teachers can often reuse rubrics for a variety of activities. Well-constructed rubrics are easy to translate into curriculum. There are two types of rubrics, analytic and holistic. Analytic rubrics identify and assess components of a finished product. Holistic rubrics assess student work as a whole. There are pros and cons for both types of rubrics. Analytic rubrics are detailed and assure that multiple teachers understand and use the rubric the same way. Analytical rubrics generally provide more detailed information that may be useful in planning and improving instruction and communicating with students. However, analytic rubrics may be too detailed for younger children, and they do not evaluate overall product. They evaluate subsets of the final product. There is less detail to analyze with a holistic rubric, making it easier for younger students to integrate this information into their schema, and it also evaluates overall product. Some issues regarding holistic rubrics is that different teachers may score differently because it lacks detail. Holistic scoring is often more efficient. Holistic scores are obtained by comparing individual student work to model work samples, which represent good, fair, and poor responses to the assignment. This form of evaluation requires that the teacher develop a set of criteria that describe the entire work product at various levels of success. These criteria are based on the desired outcomes and should be couched in language appropriate to the discipline. It is often useful to share the criteria with students as part of the assignment. Students find it much easier to hit a target they can see. Holistic scoring is especially useful in grading large numbers of student products. It has been most commonly used with writing. Usually more than one evaluator grades student essays. Then, using evaluative criteria developed from the learning objectives, a teacher selects several student essays that exhibit high, average, or low achievement. These models then become the standards by which the instructor and one or more graders evaluate a group of essays. Each evaluator reads the student paper quickly and determines whether it is stronger or weaker than its closest equivalent among model essays. When the grader has determined the score of a student essay, she marks the appropriate number in one corner of the front page of the essay, folds down the corner so as not to influence other graders, and passes the paper on to the next grader. When all the papers have been scored at least 3 times, the final scores are given a letter grade equivalent. An advantage that holistic scoring has is its efficiency. Holistic scoring takes much less time to grade. With the models or rubrics firmly in mind, a holistic grader's first impression of a work product is highly reliable. However, there are several weaknesses of holistic scoring. While the score given will be reliable, the student will not necessarily know the reason behind his grade. With this type of rubric, formative comments with regard to specific areas in need of improvement are not available to the student. The model work samples can be given to the students for comparison, but no special details are provided. Holistic grading can be impractical for individual teachers. While an individual teacher could go through a stack of papers looking for high, middle, and low models and grade the rest of the papers according to these models, the best situation for holistic grading occurs when 2 or more teachers work together. A rubric is not useful unless it is directly aligned to the state standards, the instructional objectives, and the task. For that reason, you should make rubrics a part of your planning. This will help you understand exactly what you want your students to learn from an activity. Creating rubrics take time, but once put in place, they save time for both the teacher and the student. Rubrics can also be weighted. This means that some areas are judged more heavily than others. Students can also develop their own rubrics. This can improve their interest, motivation, and performance. Students may also buy into the project more if they have a say in how it will be judged. However, you may need to provide the structure and guide them toward your intentions. Some basic reminders. Neither the analytic nor the holistic rubric is better than the other. Consider your students and who will be grading when deciding which type to use. A best practice is to present to your students anchor products or exemplars of products at various levels of development. When creating a rubric, you want to follow these basic guidelines. First, you need to determine the concepts you want to teach. To determine this, refer back to the state standards and learning objectives. Next, Choose the criteria to be evaluated. Specifically, name the evidence to be produced. Then develop a grid. Plug the concepts and criteria into the grid. Use models of rubrics to help you with formatting, such as those in this course. Once you are ready to implement the rubric, it is good to share the rubric with the students before they begin the project. This way they know what your expectations are. After you have evaluated the end product, compare students' work with the rubric to determine if they have mastered the concept. It is important to ask for feedback from your students to see if any changes need to be made to the rubric for future uses. There are several elements included in rubrics. One element is the rubric dimension. Typically, rubrics will have one or more dimensions on which performance is rated. The dimensions serve as the basis for judging the student response. The rubric should also contain definitions or examples that illustrate the attributes being measured. These clarify the meaning of each trait or dimension on the rating scale. How many points should a rating scale have? There is no one right answer to this question. Consider these as you make your decision. Each point on the scale needs to be well defined. This may be difficult to do for longer scales, and longer scales make it harder to get agreement among scorers for inter-rater reliability. Extremely short scales make it difficult to identify small differences between students. Do you simply want to divide students into 2 or 3 groups based on whether they have attained or exceeded the standard for an outcome? If so, then a short scale may be adequate. If you are rating a product or a performance on several different dimensions, will you want to add up the scores so that each is equally weighted? If so, you may find it easier to have all scales the same length. Finally, there should be standards of excellence for specified performance levels, accompanied by models or examples of each level wherever possible. This lesson provides some links to give you more information about rubrics, as well as many rubrics already developed by teachers for all sorts of tasks and activities. Remember that while there are definite guidelines for creating rubrics, the most important aspect is that they are part of an overall balanced assessment plan for your classroom.